Daily Hope. My name is Joan Stevenson. I am the director of kids and all who love them and know that they are not only the future of the church, but they are the church right now. Well, today, church, we are in 2 Kings chapter 21, and you've made it almost to the end of 2 Kings. And throughout the book of 1st and 2nd Kings, we see these themes over and over again. We see good kings who affirmed the covenant and followed God. And we see kings who were bad and who did not follow God's covenant and led the people astray. And then we also see throughout the book of 1st and 2nd Kings, God's messengers, his servants, the prophets, who came to warn his people. Well, what happened before today? Yesterday in 2 Kings 21, you heard about King Hezekiah. But before that, just to remind you, the nation of Israel had been divided into two kingdoms. There was the kingdom of Israel, which had already been taken into captivity by the Assyrians. And there's the kingdom of Judah, and that's the kingdom we're looking at today. The kingdom of Judah was still was still intact. They had not been led into captivity. And like all the other kings, there's lots of bad kings and a few good kings. And King Hezekiah was a good king. He was the king you learned about yesterday who followed God, who tried to get rid of idols. And he, near the end of his kingdom, he has an illness of which he recovers miraculously. And today we learn about his son, King Manasseh. King Manasseh was just 12 years old. Can you imagine that? 12, a preteen, when he becomes king over Judah and reigns with his father for 10 years. So 10 years they are kings together. And then for another 45 years, King Manasseh rules on his own. Now, if you've ever had a boss in your life or a teacher or somebody who was in politics that you didn't agree with, we complain about things that last like for a year or a few years, but can you imagine 55 years of a bad king? That's most people's lifetime. And we see this king evaluated not on whether he won wars or military conflicts or whether he brought economic prosperity, but whether or not he did good or evil in the eyes of the Lord. Well, we learn really, really quickly that Manasseh did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Verse 2 sums up basically how God saw Manasseh. He says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. So Manasseh goes back to following all these evil ways that God had had destroyed out of the land before the Israelites came to live there. But instead of Manasseh following in his father's footsteps, he goes back and reverses things, and he rebuilds altars. He goes back to practicing sorcery and divination. He consults mediums and spiritists. He also burns his son in the fire as a burnt offering to a false god. It looks like things can't get much worse. And unfortunately, Manasseh also led the people astray. And he even takes a carved Asherah pole and puts it in the temple of God, the place that is only for the reverence and worship of the one and true God. And verse 9 says, "But the people did not listen. Manasseh led them astray so that they did more evil than the nations the Lord had destroyed." So God, again, the covenant is not being followed. People are deviating from it. He sends a messenger. And God sends the prophet and warns the people of Judah. And he says to them, "Therefore, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I am going to bring such disaster on Jerusalem and Judah that the ears of everyone who hear it will tingle. I will stretch out over Jerusalem the plumb line used, the measuring line used against Samaria, and the plumb line used against the house of Ahab. And I will wipe out Jerusalem as one wipes a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down." I wonder what it was like to hear that message. I wonder what it was like to be living under the rule of King Manasseh. And I wonder what it was like for King Manasseh to hear this message. Well, we don't know from 2 Kings chapter 21 how Manasseh responds, because it goes on to tell the story of his son. But we do know from 2 Chronicles chapter 33, which is a second telling of the kings of Israel and Judah, that God gives Manasseh a second chance. The Lord spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they paid no attention. So the Lord brought against them the army commanders of the king of Assyria, who took Manasseh prisoner, put a hook in his nose, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon. In his distress, he sought the favor of the Lord his God and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers. And when he prayed to him, the Lord was moved by his entreaty and listened to his plea. So he brought him back to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew the Lord is God. Wow. In his distress, Manasseh calls out to God, and God listens and is moved. God gives Manasseh a second chance. Does he deserve it? Absolutely not. But God gives grace to the humble. Some of you might be familiar with this passage that I memorized as a new follower of Jesus when I was a freshman in high school, Ephesians 2:8-9. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. And as you read this chapter for yourself, I want you to think about where you see yourself in this story. Are you like Manasseh? Are you God? Are you feeling like God who is dealing with people who are disobeying? Do you feel like you're one of the people who's part of the nation, the kingdom of Judah? Where do you see yourself in this story? And what is your favorite part of this story? And also, what is a part of the story that you struggle with? I wonder how the God of all truth, the Holy Spirit, is leading you into truth in this story, and how he is speaking to you and how you might want to respond to it. Have a great day.